This is MC Fireside Chats, a weekly show devoted to the outdoor hospitality industry, hosted by Brian Searl and Cara Csizmadia. You'll hear from special guests that focus on topics to help your business succeed, all backed by Modern Campground, the most innovative news source in the industry.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MC Fireside Chats. My name is Brian Searl with Insider Perks here, as always, with Cara Csizmadia from the Canadian Camping and RV Council. Super excited to have another one of our open discussion shows here. We're missing a few people, as always, because we're all super busy in the outdoor hospitality industry. So Scott Foos said he might be able to join us at some point today. And then Ruben Martinez is missing as well from the American Glamping Association. But super excited to have Mark and Sandy and Randy here and Casey from Campspot. And so we're going to kind of go around and talk about some different things that have come up in the outdoor hospitality industry in the last month or so. Before we get started, I want everybody to know that you should not be concerned about me. I've lost some of my facial hair. It is not a disease or anything. If you were all worried, I know you're all probably concerned, but my girlfriend suggested that I would look better in a goatee, so I will recover from that. But anything else that we want to talk about today? What is going on in the outdoor hospitality industry? I know we were talking about trade shows before we started. The Mid-Atlantic Conference recently wrapped up in Florida. We've got a bunch more things coming up, NCA, stuff like that. Why don't we just briefly talk about some of the shows that people are going to and what they think about that stuff coming up, if you want to.
Yeah, I can lead off if you want. We got, we have the NCA show, the Waco show, then there's the Michigan show. And I think shortly after that, there's the California show. So we're going to be busy with at least those. We try to make as many as we can. But yeah, we've got all those coming up here, I think, in the next 30 days. So
it's super weird for me, Casey, because I used to go to every single show, and I will go to trade shows again. I just happen to be in Canada now, and so it's trying to sort out my time and spread it equally among wherever I can. But I remember pre-COVID, before January, I was booked for 45 days on the road straight, attending all these conferences in March and April. And so it's kind of a crazy, hectic season for vendors and park owners, and especially multi-property owners. I'm curious to wonder, maybe Scott could comment on that if maybe now or in the future, but how he manages multiple parks in multiple states with multiple conferences.
Yeah, the big thing we're seeing on conferences is on the consumer side. There's a lot of interest on the consumer side for events. Obviously, the Tampa show was a massive success, and we're talking to the Escapades, which is coming up here in Tennessee, and then some of the other owners conferences that are going on. If you own a Grand Design, you go to a Grand Design conference, and all of these events, the second they open up their signups, they fill up. They're completely full, and there's a lot of excitement on that end. So it'll be definitely a twist for us to go to those more consumer-facing shows, whereas generally we've been going to the industry style shows. So it's kind of exciting to see that excitement about the industry. And I think the big overlying question mark, and everybody knows that I'm really annoying and I'm like a broken record on this, is the question mark of what happens as we go ahead. I mean, are we at peak camping? Do we see a drop off? Does it continue going up? Does gas continue to go up $10 a barrel every day from here till infinity? How does that impact the industry? So it's going to be a very interesting year, to say the least. And again, I'm back to my old theory, which is proving very accurate, that I only plan 3 days in advance anymore. So that's actually holding up really well this year, right? Who knew we were going to invade, or Ukraine was going to be invaded by Russia and all that type of stuff? So 3 days in advance, that's where I'm at. And there's currently no trade shows happening in the next 3 days. So I'm good right now.
I kind of enjoy the changing stuff, right? It keeps me on my toes, and I have to adapt and pivot, and it's always interesting. But I think, as always, and everybody here will probably agree with me, that the campground industry is in for outdoor hospitality industry is in for another great year. What that looks like is always going to be disproportionate around what park and what you're doing. And Casey, we were talking about people still looking to do online reservations before the show started. And so obviously those people, if they implement that, are going to see a boost. And so it's just really interesting. But I think there's no shortage of, it's going to go up if you're doing things the right way.
Yeah, I definitely totally agree.
There's another part of this whole thing, I think, is
those of us who've been around the industry for a little while, you could kind of see some baseline expectations over X amount of years, and you'd experience a little gradual uptick or something of that nature. Then the interest starts building to start acquiring some of these outdoor hospitality assets. And then about 2018 to 2020, you say, wow, it's getting a little bit weird out there right now. And from 2020 forward, if anybody can tell me what's going to be happening to Mark's point, the next 3 days, let alone week, let alone month, you're a seer. You've got a crystal ball that I don't have, because it's literally hand-to-hand combat every day. What's happening today? Major acquisitions, portfolio roll-ups, Sun buying the UK company, right? And
LSI, yeah.
Talking about major fundamental pivots to the entire architecture. And I literally don't know from one day to the next what I'm going to see when I go to Modern Campground, by the way, and find out what's happening in the news. You can't call it. You just got to be very nimble, be able to react very quickly to the changing dynamics.
Yeah, I got to say, we're even seeing that on the consumer side. We're actually on the eve of the Toronto Spring Camping and RV Show, which starts tomorrow. And CRVA's team there had to really kind of quickly pivot. After it'll technically, I believe, be the first in-person RV show in Canada since 2019. And Ontario had initially had capacity restrictions and things that, made them planned for some kind of virtual event. And then really last minute kind of found out they needed to do a pivot, and their in-person contract would be able to go forward with the event center. So they've put together what I think is going to be an incredible show in a really record short period of time. But I'll echo what Mark said about consumer interest in attending. It sounds like ticket sales for that event are doing really, really well, advanced sales. So I think obviously, Canada's dynamic is a little bit different. We're just on the precipice of getting back there, but I know certainly on the dealers' side, definitely Canada's our outdoor hospitality conference is next week, and unfortunately we had to go virtual. I certainly know there's lots of appetite from operators up here to have an in-person version of that event. Hopefully in 2023 that'll be successful, but RV shows coming back, all that stuff kind of coming back to life is super exciting right now in Canada for sure.
And we should mention, by the way, the Toronto Spring Camping, RV and Camping Show and Sale. It's a super long name. I'm sorry, Shane. I appreciate your efforts to include all the things, but I get confused. I'm not smart enough to remember that. But it's super exciting. It's happening. We're going to be doing a special live episode of MC Fireside Chats. Cara and I are going to be doing that. We're going to interview the couple from RV There Yet who was on this show a little bit earlier, but we're going to be doing a live show during that show, remote. But on a giant, huge screen outside for all the people to watch. And so it's going to be super exciting for us, kind of our first consumer gig, if you will. But super excited to do that. And then, as Cara was saying, the Canadian Outdoor Hospitality Conference and Expo is coming up. And I'm really interested, this dynamic. Obviously, I'm biased, right? We're planning this virtual show. But we definitely want to get back in person. We definitely want to do hybrid. And I'll be interested to see over the next months and years how the industry evolves to serve both needs, because obviously there's nothing better than handshakes and eye contacts from a vendor networking owner standpoint. But there are also benefits to analytics and data and tracking and watching things later and all that kind of stuff. And so it'll be interesting to see how not only we adapt, but how the industry adapts to serve both people who want a little bit of each.
Agreed.
I have a little bit of a theory on that. The consumers are sprung from their confines and be able to get out in the world again. Big interest in going out to these shows. Dealers, same thing. But it's the same for all of us in the industry also. We've been kind of pent up for a long time. And the idea about going and seeing fellow colleagues in person was really kind of cool. I mean, actually see and talk with the people we've known for years and do business with on a daily basis. If I had to guess, and again, full disclaimer, who can guess? I would imagine that in person gets a huge bump initially while we all come out of our caves and say, I remember you. And then maybe it kind of levels off to a little bit more of the virtual type of thing. It's kind of a hybrid type of thing. But I think there's so much pent up demand to have public contact and interaction right now. It's let me out of here. I'm ready. Let's go talk.
So basically what you're saying, Randy, is you're excited to see the people that you missed for 2 years, but once you see them once, you're going to remember why you only want to see them once a year, and then be virtual the rest of it? Or?
How can I miss if you won't go away, right?
But yeah, it's super exciting season. What else is going on besides conferences? We got something else. I mean, the outdoor hospitality industry is booming. What else have we seen in the news recently, guys? From Campspot's perspective, I know Randy's been working with a lot of different projects, Invest Outdoors, stuff like that. Mark sees about 42 posts a day in his group. He's got to have something to share.
Yeah, I think maybe one thing that we've seen a little bit, and I don't know if it's the time of the year, but we've had a lot of smaller parks. Traditionally, like, Campspot, we've kind of focused on larger transient parks, right? They're the kind of the ones with the biggest need to, thousands and thousands of reservations coming in and the amount of time saved there. And we've just seen this huge uptick, which is awesome. It's great. In smaller parks, 20 sites, 30 sites, 40 sites, 8 sites. So obviously you have two things, a bunch of people kind of getting into the industry and realizing, I had aspirations to, have a 150 site park, but then reality sets in and how expensive it is and the timeline it takes to actually build out one of these parks. And I might need to start with 30 to start, or 40 to start, or whatnot, or 32, whatever budget or whatever time frame or whatever space you have. And to me, that's been kind of a cool thing to see. I mean, we don't have like a minimum that we charge or anything. We probably should, but we don't. And so for us, it's like someone that has, an 8 site or 10 site park really gets the same software that, like what Randy said, like a Sun Communities is using to run their entire portfolio. And to me, this has been really cool seeing the volume of these kind of more like boutique specialized campgrounds and the volume of them. Just there's tons and tons of them, which I think is just a cool, I don't know. It's just, it's something a little bit different than over the past couple of years. At this time of year, it's usually kind of this mad scramble. The bigger parks realizing the phone calls are starting to come in. They're just getting back into the office and like, this is already overwhelming. We got to do something, start doing the research, come to a decision, and then try to quickly onboard for this next season. And that's still happening, but the volume of these smaller parks realizing, hey, I can kind of take advantage of a lot of this technology, and I can take advantage of my time too, right? I might not be taking 300 phone calls a day. It might be 5 or 10 or 20. But that 20 phone calls gets me outside doing something different with my staff or with my guests. And there's a lot to be said for that. So I just thought that's been really interesting lately, seeing the volume of, smaller parks that are reaching out to us. I'm sure with other vendors as well, realizing, hey, their time is just as valuable and there's just as many benefits they can take advantage regardless of the park size.
Well, let's talk about this for a second, because I think it's a fascinating dynamic, right? I've heard LinkedIn comments and Facebook comments in the past where we kind of tend to focus on some of the larger parks and the larger groups, and the mom and pop family campgrounds are still a huge, massive part of this industry and always will be. And so sometimes maybe we neglect those, or I neglect those unintentionally. And so let's chat about this for a second, because it's a really interesting dynamic, because like you're saying, Campspot has this pricing model that doesn't necessarily take into account all of these smaller parks. I know, like Randy, from a brokerage perspective, not you specifically necessarily, but from all the brokers I've ever worked with, there's a minimum site number we want to see to sell and to buy and to acquire. And, Mark, you're welcoming some of these people into your group. Sandy, I'm sure you're coming across them. So let's chat about small parks for a little bit.
Well, with the Facebook group, it just passed 3,000 members, and the Facebook group is all, mom and pop parks. That's the bulk of the members. And I was actually going to note, in addition to what Casey was saying, is over the last week, everybody's kind of woken up and they're getting back to work here all of a sudden, getting ready for the season. The secondary thing I'll add in there is, over the last 2 weeks, we've had over 150 people try to join that group. And all those folks were not RV park owners. They're people that wanted to either build a park or buy a park. And so we had a secondary group that we're moving all those folks over to, so that the conversation can stay what it is in the main group. Point being is, there is this incredible interest from everybody, not just corporate buyers and big money, but just the average person who wants to change their life and buy an RV park or build an RV park, trying to get into this industry, or starting that path to this industry. So there's a lot of excitement about it, in the way that it gives you control of your life. It allows you to stay with your family and work. There's a lot of that mystique of owning an RV park. But anybody who's actually done it knows that this isn't an easy industry to be in. It's not simple. The good thing to hear is what Casey said about parks now trying to adopt technology, that'll be a fundamental shift for them in the operations of their park, because your biggest cost on a park is your time. If you're a mom and pop, it's your time. If you own the park and are hiring people, it's the staff, right? So you're either paying for staff with money or you're paying for staff yourself with time. And so by using technology, that's going to free up folks to have more time to themselves to better operate their parks.
Yeah.
Well, and also from our perspective at United Park Brokers and also Invest Outdoors, there's a really interesting pivot that's happened that speaks to what everybody's talking about here, which is, even a couple of years ago, the bigger institutions wanted to have 200 sites in the Sun Belt. Well, those waters have been fished. So you have to adjust your criteria. What's interesting, though, is what you find is if you're thinking traditional RV park and you've got 100 sites and your nightly rate is $50 a night, let's just use round numbers. If you pivot to a different sort of accommodation, like a glamping tent, a park model, something like that, you can get triple the ADR. You need 1/3 of the footprint, right? So you can, with 30 sites of well-positioned inventory of a higher ADR type of caliber, you can generate the same NOI that perhaps a 75 or 100 site park would have in a traditional type model. What that's
Randy,
done,
I don't mean to cut you up. I just want to, for our audience, ADR, NOI definitions, please.
Oh, net operating income, NOI, what you make after everything's already been spent. ADR meaning average daily rate, what your average rate is that you charge the consumer.
Okay, perfect. Sorry.
And so with a smaller footprint, but with more robust accommodations, the ADR goes up, the NOI ends up being the same as a larger traditional RV park. And the side effect of that is you've got not quite the institutional like the REITs and all that sort of stuff, but you've got very savvy mid-level investors that can now acquire these smaller parks at a much lower acquisition cost, but then put the rest of their money into repositioning that asset to take advantage of the great trends with glamping and what have you. But what that also means is they're not coming into this thinking, well, we'll just kind of do what has been. They're going to embrace technology. They're going to be calling Casey. They're going to be building robust websites. They're going to do yield management. So whereas a few years ago, a 50-site park was almost verboten and nobody talked about it, they're actually pretty darn hot. And there's some savvy people going after them.
Yeah,
and I think what you're saying, Randy, is not important just for the investor who wants to come in and buy and maybe revamp an existing park, but also for a lot of the mom and pops who feel like they may not be competitive because they're landlocked. They only have X amount of space, and they don't think about reallocating that space in new and different ways. So I think we need to think outside the box and think about how do we redefine what our park looks like and what can be successful, and not just think we all have to be the big park that every site's over 100 foot long and, has all the high end amenities. There's still a lot of people out there that are true campers, and the glamping tents and the things that take the smaller footprint are much easier to reallocate their property to. So I love what you're talking about, not just for investors, but just for existing parks trying to survive.
Yeah.
And to your point, Sandy, just one final thing, and I promise I'll shut up. What you're saying, Sandy, is really important, because the folks who thought they may have been the excluded middle, the smaller to mid-sized parks, now realize that the consumers don't always want to be in a 300-site mega park. They like unique and small and klitschy with a very unique personality to it. And they're going to spend good money to go to these smaller parks that have a unique, clearly defined experience. They'll come back to that selling the zip code type of thing. Those will always have a place. They always have and they always will. The difference is the level of operational expertise and the capital going after those assets is increased exponentially. The consumer benefits, the owners benefits. It really is kind of a win all the way.
Well, in addition to that, if you're talking smaller parks, there's also parks that don't necessarily need to invest. They're competing on price, right? So there's campers that aren't going to spend $50 a night. They're looking for a $30 a night location, and you have 20 sites. You run them out for $30 a night. Then again, your only cost is your time. And if you can automate sequences, if you can make most of your process without you in it, then that becomes a very nice side hustle in addition to whatever your existing career is or your retirement plans or whatnot. So there are those parks out there that are 20, 25 sites. They're low end on the price point, but people are staying there. And if they automate a lot of the work that they would be doing in an office, why not do it?
Yeah, this is interesting, because the size of park, it's almost, we have parks that reach out all the time, and they almost are saying, like, well, we're probably not able to use your software, right, because of the size. And we're going, no, there's no limit in number of sites you have to have, right? So that's kind of one misconception. You could almost do a seminar. We've been talking about these, seminars and things, but one thing that could be so relevant is how to take back your time, right, and how to value it properly, right? Because even you take a 40 site, primarily seasonal park, and they're thinking, okay, I'm not taking online reservations. I don't need to. I only have a couple sites that are available. My guests stay here month to month, so on and so forth. Okay, but they're taking payments every month by check, and they're sending out bills every single month. They're not allowing their guests to pay online. They're not setting up an ACH. They're not allowing them to charge to site. They're not adding like the utility meeting automatically to the bill, and it's just automatically getting sent out. So even for some of these parks that don't fit the large transient park that's going to save a significant amount of time, and Campspot's going to make a bunch of money and blah blah blah. We're saying, well, we might not make you as much money as a transient park, but your time is worth a ton of money. And so your time, as far as just automating your billing and automating some of the calculations of your utility meterings, and allowing people to charge to site, and automating the accounting and stuff like that, where you're having journal entries that are being made for you in the software that you're using. All these things, all of a sudden you start adding up where this time is being spent, and then you're going, okay, like it's not. I'm not going to make $15,000 off of lock site fees. Well, no, because no one's locking their site. I'm giving everyone their site. I'm not going to get all this extra money from grid optimization from software doing that. No, but just some of the basic things that you think about how many times a park like that would explain over the phone what their site types look like, or what size they fit, and things of that sort. Whereas if you have images and you have a description of the different site types, it's that many more phone calls that you're not having to explain the same thing over and over. And again, that adds up very, very quickly. And so then instead of spending all the time, once a week or twice a week or whatever the case is in an office doing admin stuff, maybe you are able to get outside and add some type of cool amenity, or make some space for something that's going to draw people in to spend a little bit more per night. And those are the little things where, again, just taking back control of your time. You don't have to embrace everything with technology, and change your, the way that you operate your park. And it doesn't have to be transient. You don't have to have a water slide, but just subtle things of the day to day that you can automate and streamline. It's a big deal. Whether it's your 1-person show, a 2-person show, or 100-person show.
So yeah, and I think. Sorry, Brian. I was going to say on that, one of the things that owners that are maybe tech adverse, they heard everything Casey said, and they're like, "Oh my God, I can't do all of that." The point being is you don't have to do all that. You can do it incrementally. Do one thing right now, right? Do online reservations, and then next month do one more thing, right? Just kind of step into it. You don't need to do it all at once.
Yeah.
Well, so this is what I was going to say, right? Like this is, and I'm one of the biggest geeks probably any of you know. Which maybe is a compliment or a curse, I don't know. But before I go into that, I want to apologize because my name was Cara Csizmadia for the first part of the show. And so if any of you got confused, I know we look really similar. I finally actually updated that to make myself Brian. But for technology, this is something that I've been in business as Insider Perks since 2009. And this is something that took me years and is still an ongoing process with all of the things that you're talking about, just from not an Insider Perks standpoint, but from I'm a company and I'm running it standpoint. When we first started, with the recurring payments, we were just doing social media way back in 2010, 2011, and we were having people mail us checks every single month because I didn't know any different. I had to learn how to build the websites. I had to learn how to do it was all self-taught. But the amount of time I don't think you realize it sometimes until it's gone.
Yeah.
Now the checks are gone. Now I figured out how to do recurring payments through Stripe or PayPal or WooCommerce or Campspot or whatever it is. Oh my God, I have time to breathe now. I can eat dinner. I can do the things. And so that, and clocking in for employees, and, recurring receipts. And there's dozens of other things that are just escaping me right now. Maybe Cara can tell us a little bit about how she her journey through Park Owner, she pivoted to some of that stuff. I know I'm putting you on the spot, Cara, but.
Yeah, no, that's a near and dear topic to my heart. Actually, when I inherited my park, our reservation system was an accounting ledger book and a pencil and an eraser. And we were manually filling out profile cards and storing credit card numbers in a file fax it's crazy. So we very quickly did some shifting because there was, obviously a lot of really avoidable drama that could result from that. I mean, a pencil and an eraser. There's various things, losing track of paperwork and all those things are super simple when you're functioning like that. So that part alone was a big motivator for me to push to shift the older generation who we inherited the park from forward a little bit. And there was some resistance there for sure. The day I brought in the first computer, grandma was not happy. But very quickly, when I started to be able to like bring her a weekly revenue sales report, I was bringing her reports about, how our retail sales. I could tell her on any day how much propane we had sold that day. She quickly started to shift perspective as well and got on board with us. But we worked through some hurdles. We used a couple of different software options, and that they had their pros and cons, and I think they're changing and growing so much over the years. It completely changed our business, and it did have some growing pains. I had some staff who had never used a computer before, and so suddenly we had to go through some significant training stuff, and we did lose a couple of people over that. So there was some hurdles, but overall it was just a fundamental necessity. And then next after that came shifting to starting to take online reservations, and that shift away from having to manually process every single booking and have a long conversation with every customer coming in the door about their RV and how many dogs they have and all of those things, really started to impact our efficiency level to the point where our guests that were already in the park started to be able to have a higher level of service because my front desk staff wasn't on the phone all the time with next month's guests. They were able to provide that really focused strategy to serve guests in-house. And then we also could free them up to start doing more things. We started adding events programming and doing, some kids activity stuff and things like that. That really, it was a snowball effect, that one really easy choice to bring in that computer.
And Cara, something you just said just really struck a chord with me, because when I think about, in case you were talking about some of the smaller parks and, more people are starting to embrace this technology, it seems to me that what they're really doing is investing in their creativity. And what I mean by that is if you're a small park operator or large park operator, you probably got into it because what you're best at is putting things together, organizing, making the park better, organizing activities, being with people, and you're good at that. If you're not necessarily the strongest at accounting and pushing paper and managing stuff like that, if you can find a tool like a Campspot or something else to help take that process that maybe you're not as good at or don't have the attitude towards, and make that more of an automated process, and you just bought yourself time to be creative. Now I can go out in the community, network with local vendors. I can go talk with my guests, build some loyalty, work on that stuff. So if you can buy your creative time back through automation, it's probably the smartest investment you'll ever do.
Well, and I just want to say too that we're all talking about Campspot, and Campspot obviously helps tremendously, but I just don't want to narrow it down to just online reservations too, because it's all kinds of things that can help save your time that I've learned over the years. And I feel like change is hard for anybody. Change is hard for me, for a business owner, for anybody who works at a company, for you in your personal life, right? And sometimes I just don't, the people get overwhelmed with online reservations all by themselves. And the amount of things that, in addition to online reservations, that Campspot doesn't offer or may never offer because it's just not Campspot's business model, that can manage HR for you or time off or whatever can save your time to allow, like Randy said, that more creativity, that more flexibility. Like some people don't even realize it until it happens. And so it's just an interesting dynamic, but it takes years to do. And so don't overburden yourself and think you have to do it in one night.
Right.
Yeah, two of the I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Cindy.
I was just going to say, two of the other things that's always top of my list when I'm talking to parks is, one is when you do have an automated system, then you've got real-time access to data analytics, and you can make decisions in the middle of the month that could pick you up for the end of the month. If you're doing everything manually, or you don't have the right software, you wait till you get your reports back from your accountant that tells you whether you made or lost money, versus having it in-house and with it automated and all the great softwares that are out there now, on a day-to-day basis. The other thing is we really have a labor crisis right now at parks, just like everybody else. And so being able to save manual time for employees to do the things that they have to do is really important. I had a park that was looking to hire an assistant manager. They were paying $70,000 plus bonuses at this park. It was in a very nice location. They had 3 people apply. The first one didn't show up. The second one showed up and stayed one day and then decided they didn't like it and they wanted to leave. The third one showed up, stayed a week, and then it got an offer from a park that they had also applied at the same time that was offering them $5,000 more. So they left. And that's not even talk about work campers, right? Which most of our parks, operate using work campers. So we really need to automate and take away some of those things that take up so much time if we can, and especially when it's so affordable right now.
Yeah, it's interesting with the small park, because there's the blessing and the curse of it, and I'll try to explain this properly without throwing myself under the bus here. Like when the kind of like a light bulb will go on with sometimes smaller parks, and they'll realize, okay, I can save time I don't have to send out my own bills. I can collect payments automatically, or the guests can pay online. And so certain things start to, and it's really interesting because I'm actually going to say probably, it's 100% fact. Like our biggest critics, the people that are kind of the loudest and the most demanding, are the ones that just embrace technology within like the last month or 3 months or 6 months. Like, and then once they like get a little bit of like to scratch the surface, all of a sudden the expectation is all of a sudden becomes crazy. And it's really interesting because it's like this dynamic of saying, like, I think just like a month ago, you were writing everything down on paper, and we're doing there. I'm like, and we're with you. Like, we absolutely want to build this and absolutely want to get to this and so on and so forth. Well, you should just be able to just build it really quick. And you're like, it doesn't quite really work that way in the sense of just really quick doing anything when it comes to software. If anyone from the development need understands it, but it's almost comical in a good way, like in a fun way, is like the feature requests and the demand from parks that are paying $130 a year for everything, because there's just limited amount of reservations that are coming through, are absolutely the most demanding and critical, and very, very critical of what their expectations are once they embrace it. But that's also a good thing, right? It's also the good part of that is to continue to challenge ourselves to what does make the most sense for a 30-site park or a 300-site park, right? Because the 300-site park is going to go, what are they going to look at? They're going to look at bottom line revenue, and they're going to say, okay, if I made an extra, $180,000 in ancillary income because of a couple of features that, we have or someone else has, that's what's going to matter to them, right? But if it's someone else, it could be the most minimal detail, but that's what's consuming their day-to-day, right? And that's more important, or that's more relevant than a bottom line dollar figure. So it is an interesting dynamic. Like, we kind of open up the can of worms for that, but it does help us grow, right? We have to funnel it all in and try to make sure that we're, picking and choosing the right things to kind of pursue. But it is funny because, like, again, the loudest critics are typically the ones that, just decided to embrace technology and are some of the smaller parks. But it's pretty interesting.
Well, the thing is it's addicting, right? Like you get to that point where you're like, oh my God, I've discovered this fantastic thing that saves me all this time. I want to do all the things now, and you want to do all at once. And I just want help, and I want development, and I want somebody to do it, and I want it all to happen right now because I want all my time back that I didn't realize I was missing. And it's a really interesting dynamic, especially for me. I was the same way when I was first starting our company, but it's part of the reason, like in the beginning of this year, we pivoted to like instead of describing ourselves at Insider Perks as a marketing company, as business engineers, because we're doing so much more of this technology consulting in addition to the marketing. And what we found is that the opening question is what do I need? How do I do it? Where do I start? And the answer is it's different for every single person. So what we're having to do is go person by person, company by company, and saying, or employee by employee, what is taking the most of your time? What's taking the big chunk of your time? And we have to sit there and analyze people's days sometimes. And then once you figure out what's taking the most of your time, automate that, and then move on to number 2 and number 3 and number 4. But it's different for every single person. And so it's really interesting to kind of see these journeys and how they change people.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's most interesting is over the last several years, watching all the different software companies, come up with the PMS softwares. The original model for most, I think this was true with you too, Casey, was that you charged only for the online reservations. Well, what we learned quickly at the parks was that that's counterintuitive, because if we want people to stop calling us, right, because we're trying to reduce our labor, but we're charging them an online booking fee, we're encouraging them to call us, because early on, there was no charge if somebody called the park and made a reservation. It was only when they booked online. I would love to see that reversed, right? Yeah. Because charge if they call the park, right? Yeah. Or charge a convenience fee or whatever it happens to be, but almost penalize people for calling, because everybody understands that your time is worth something, right? And when you're making it online, you're not involving someone's time. I don't have a problem with making money on an online booking, but I sure would like to see some encouragement to push people to more online booking.
Yeah, we definitely encourage to have a booking fee on both ends, just because, again, there shouldn't be an advantage to taking up someone's time, right? It shouldn't cause it. And we, there has been some parks that I say it's $5 if you book over the phone. It's only $2 if you book online. Have you at least looked online to see? Because everything's available, everything's there, and it's all, so it's interesting. We definitely encourage that, to charge really for both if you want to pass on pretty much all the, not pretty much all the fees. Just because again, people don't walk that.
Well, what I'll say to that also is you got to look at the consumer problem. So why does a camper call? And the reason they call is the information is not easily available for them online. So whether that's what site they're going to book, or what the availability is, or all these random questions. Obviously, why we built the tool we built is to help people do that. So from a park owner's perspective, if you're getting a lot of phone calls, start logging the reason for those phone calls. Are they asking about site size? Are they asking about access? Are they asking about the restrooms? What are the question categories that you're getting from people that are calling you? Mm-hmm. And then try to address that through your website. Does your website do a good job explaining that to them, right? Are they asking whatever that question is? And so that's a marketing problem, right? How do you guide people into the desired actions you want them to take? And this is a big one. And it's definitely not on Campspot's part. And I'm about to knock some folks, but there's some software companies in this industry that do not provide a quality experience to the consumer from a booking perspective. And so there are parks out there that say, I've got reservation software. Yeah, but is it user friendly? Does it work on a mobile phone? Is it simple for that person to use? Really ask. In the end, the reason somebody's calling is because they couldn't do what they wanted to do online. Mm-hmm. Either they didn't do it because they don't have access to online. It didn't work on a phone or whatnot. But it's an important question to ask when you're talking about that subject: is why are they calling?
Yeah,
that's a fascinating dynamic, right? Is studying those kinds of things like you're talking about, Mark. And there are tools that help you solve that, like your virtual tours, a frequently asked questions section on your website, putting more information and photos and things like that on a Campspot or a reservation provider, offering live chat, even if it's just a bot that responds to common frequently asked questions. But you have to identify what those questions are, because everybody's different. Everybody's website's different. The information you communicate is different. But I remember we had a conversation on this show, I don't know, weeks or months ago, about putting whether you were Starlink compatible with satellites on your website, or whether you have phone service, whether you're Verizon or AT&T. And so those are all ways that you can cut down that kind of volume of phone calls in addition to online reservations.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely goes beyond just reservations, that's for sure. Like you said, Mark knows this well. I mean, we went to the extent of saying, we'll pay for you to get your photos taken, just because it's that relevant. Like, we can't prove the value of online reservations if people are looking at like nothing. They're visual people. They want to see something. So it's an interesting topic, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it's something that's missed. And it's all businesses, right? Because I run my business, Brian runs his business. You end up getting a lot about yourself. It's, everybody thinks about themselves. So you start thinking about your issues. It's really hard to step aside and look at your customers' issues. So it's a good exercise always to go back and ask it from your customer's perspective. And here's an interesting exercise I would encourage anybody that owns a business to do is grab your mobile phone and go navigate your website on a mobile phone. Because we all work in offices and we're on desktops and we don't actually use our own websites on a mobile device. I guarantee you're going to find something that doesn't work on a mobile device right now on your website. So take that extra step to do that. The trends we're seeing right now, and Brian, you can probably echo this, it's about 70% of consumers in the camping industry are visiting if you're an RV park or campground, your website on a mobile device right now. Only about 30% are on desktop. So if you're not testing your site and your tools on mobile, you're missing out.
Yeah, I think we're at 63 or 65% of online reservations are made via mobile, and that number is going up and up and up. So even again, I'm not calling anything out, but just even if you are taking online reservations, go through and do it on your phone, because if you're having to scroll over and squeeze in and squeeze out and there's pop-ups and stuff like that, those don't work on phones. And so, again, it's just going to drive up the amount of phone calls that you get. So yeah, it's definitely good advice to just vet that out.
Well, I'll throw myself under the bus here for a second. We had, and to Mark's point that you don't ever look at it, right? Sometimes we don't look at it as marketing agencies as often as we should for clients who we've already designed websites for. And so I had a client call us up, 2 or 3 weeks ago and say they were at a conference and they just so happened to be showing their mobile website, and I had missed something, and like the size of an image was super long, right? And it just didn't work on mobile.
How dare you?
And so we make these mistakes. We're all human, right? But you have to pay attention to that stuff. And so I had to go back and fix that image and made a few other tweaks that I just kind of looked at it with a fresh set of eyes because I hadn't seen it in a year, right? And learned some things and changed some things around on other clients' websites. But it's so important to do that. And the tools are there. This is back to the automation and the tech and why you need somebody to work with you, even if it's just your son or your daughter or your friend who knows these things, because the tools are there to help you analyze user behavior, whether it's through your basic Google Analytics or Mark, I don't know if you ever use heat mapping and things like that. Casey, I think you guys do on Campspot, don't you?
Yep.
To analyze user behavior, you can watch what people are doing on the websites. And so I remember I'm not going to say the reservation system, it wasn't Campspot, but a year or two ago, I remember we did heat mapping for a client and looked at how the user was navigating and moving their mouse on mobile through the reservation process. And to Mark's point, it was one of those older kind of didn't really work well on mobile type things. And we found out that literally you couldn't on Apple Safari phone, you couldn't actually click and change your date ranges. And we were watching people rage click trying to get the dates. And so they weren't getting any reservations from Apple phones. And we had to actually call the software company and had to fix it. So it's really interesting, some of the stuff you can uncover. And if you take the time to step back and analyze that or have a partner who will for you.
Yeah.
Well, on this topic, just because I think this is somewhat, related. We've always been big components in this, take or leave this, but we've always been big components, of course, of having a map and having people be able to book via a map. And that's a, debated topic, and we don't necessarily need to go into that. But the idea is that people are going to call, they want to know based on location where things are at in the park and ideally be able to book there. As an owner, you can pick and choose which way you want to go. But one thing that we've seen a ton is even on a basic map that has a layout of the park, when parks have added a very simple icon of a children's little playground, right? It's just a simple icon, and the reality of that playground, it doesn't even matter. It's the fact that it could have a slide or as a swing by it. It's mind-blowing the amount of additional reservations that would then start locking around this $1,500 little playground icon, right? It's nothing more than that, but it's just the idea that, hey, there's something for my kids to do right by this site. I want to guarantee that site. And so we've actually used the heat map analysis of lock sites and revenue per site. That's on the dashboard there to help parks almost expand to put additional amenities there, because they pay for themselves immediately, right? They pay for themselves just with whether it's lock site or just choosing that side of the park where primarily everyone was choosing another side. So there's just some subtle, really, small things that you can do that, again, just it gives you the data, gives the information to make some of those decisions easier.
Well, this is revenue opportunity too, right? Like we all talk about site lock fees, and you obviously may charge more to lock a fee around a playground or a park or whatever else. Maybe you just flip this, Casey, and have people like tell them that the playground might just move before they come if they don't lock in the playground and charge a playground lock fee.
Playground optimization. Yep. Then this could be gone unless you lock it in as an add-on. Just make that slide an add-on, otherwise it gets moved.
That's it. So. But yeah, it's all an interesting dynamic. So it's hard when you're in your own business. It's hard for me. I'm sure it's hard for Mark, and I'm sure it's hard for Randy and the other business owners. When Cara, you own your park. I'm Sandy, of course, you own your own consulting company too. But it's hard to step back and kind of look at that from a 10,000-foot view because you're in it every day, and kind of it's not just park owners who need to do it. It's me, it's Mark, it's everybody who needs to step back and look at that from a holistic user experience.
Yeah. I'll give you some tips on how to do that. So one of the things we've built in purposefully is feedback forms within our website that call for people to tell us if there's bugs or not, and then easy pass to contact us. And what usually every other day or so, we'll get a very honest response from somebody like, oh, these are awesome, but it's too expensive or whatever the response is. Now, here's the trick. Remove your emotion from the response. Respond professionally, but inquire deeper. So, I had somebody who say, hey, you guys are great, but you don't have any boondocking spots, with these tours. And I responded, well, what type of camper are you? Right. And so it ended up getting in a conversation with this gentleman to where by the end of the conversation, he actually agreed with the reason why we don't have boondocking spots on the site. And so now we've built a fan. We've built somebody who's now engaged with us. And so if you're running an RV park or campground, how can you do that? The simplest way is your post-stay email that you send to somebody. How did you enjoy your stay? And ask. If they say, yes, I enjoyed my stay, take them to Google or whatever to write a review. If they said no, take them to an online form that emails you with that feedback. That way you're immediately getting negative feedback and you can address it immediately. Another thing is just a simple form on your website that says, have a random question or comment, fill this out, let us know. And you'll be surprised. People are very willing to tell you what they think about you, both good or bad, and then take that feedback and adjust accordingly.
I wish I remembered it. I was just trying to Google it to see if I could find it, but there's a really good book we used to give away at conferences called Hug Your Haters. And they had a dollar amount, I think, that they placed on the value of an online review to your business. And it was fascinating. I wish I could remember how much it was, but everybody, way back when we used to only do online reviews at Insider Perks and social posting, we used to spit that number out all the time just to talk to people to say like that feedback. What is right, what is wrong is so important to your business, and you can't just get angry when you see the bad stuff. You have to look at it as an opportunity.
Yeah, or the stupid stuff. I mean, there's just a conversation yesterday. An owner had a review from somebody who was pissed that they didn't let them run around with 5 or 6 dogs on the property, and they charged a dog fee, and this person went and wrote a nasty review about them. But and they're obviously emotionally tied to it, so they took it as an insult. But when an outsider like me, I read the review from a consumer's perspective, it was actually a really good review because I'm reading it saying, great, I'm not going to have random 5 random dogs running around the property. I like this owner, right? So there is that trick to removing your emotion, reading it from the hardest part of any business and any person is to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. As marketers of businesses, that's the first thing you always need to do is put yourself in your customer's shoes and look back at yourself. Hardest thing to do, but if you can pull it off, that's where the magic starts happening with your business.
Our businesses are like our babies. We have a hard time seeing them without bias. And so those fresh eyes and fresh input is so, so valuable, even though it hurts sometimes.
Well, and the thing is most of these people are honestly just trying to help. They just want their experience corrected for the next time. And yes, there are people who are just always going to complain and hate your business. Those people aren't new. They didn't just pop up with Facebook. They existed always. There's always been people who suck. You just can see them now because they're on Facebook and everywhere else, right? But that's kind of the point, right? Is they're just really trying to help. And sometimes we found like when the people are getting to the point where they're leaving you an online review, it's because they emailed you or called you and couldn't get a hold of you. You didn't reply to the email or you ignored their comments. And so the last thing they're doing is going to Google or Facebook in some cases versus the first thing. So yeah, it's
sometimes you say something that seems negative and you're really saying it because you want to help them. We stayed at a campground recently that had really nice high-end cabins. And in the cabins, they everything was very high end except for you had paper plates and plastic spoons and forks, so that the cleaners didn't have to do the washing, wash the dishes.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, this is so not what I would have expected. I would, when you stay at an Airbnb, which is like when you're staying in a cabin almost, there are certain things you expect. And I was paying more for this. And so it was funny because I privately mentioned this to the campground owner, and they said, that's a really great feedback, and we appreciate it. The reason we did it is because at the time we could not hire enough housekeepers. We were down based on the number of housekeepers we needed, and we never changed back. We've got all that. It's still in storage. And I was like, so sometimes you can say something that seems negative and still have a really positive impact on someone actually increasing their revenue moving forward because you were kind enough to say it.
Well, and that's the part of stepping back too. Sorry, Mark, just give me one thing. That's the part of stepping back too, and looking at your business from that 30 or 40,000 foot view, because you don't understand what the guest perception is, and you don't understand that they don't know what you know. They don't know that those dishes were in storage, or that you couldn't hire housekeeping or whatever else. And so if you're able to communicate with them, giving them an outlet to actually call you and give you feedback, take the email, respond to that, have your staff drive around in a golf cart and wave to them and say, hey, how's your stay going? It's the Holiday Inn. I used to see posters in Holiday Inns. If your stay is less than 5 stars, come talk to us and tell us why. It's just embracing that feedback. But go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
I was going to ask on that, Sandy. So you were staying at a cabin. So imagine you're traveling without your RV, but you wanted to still stay at the campground. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, we had our RV at another campground, but I needed to make a short 2-hour trip, and it was only for one night. We just didn't want to unhook everything for that one night.
And where I was going to go with that is we're exactly like you. Like, we don't have an RV right now, and going to be traveling to all these shows and stuff. I don't want to stay in a hotel. We want to have a kitchen. Like this is to Randy's point about the glamping and the smaller. There's this massive opportunity in our industry right now to add these cabins and everything else to the properties and capture folks like us who don't want to stay in a hotel, who want to stay in an Airbnb style, but don't want to have to go through the Airbnb hassle. There's a real opportunity in our industry. There's some companies that are capitalizing on that right now, but be aware that if you're an owner right now and you're relying upon RV owners only and RV campers, there's an opportunity to throw some cabins in there, stick them on Airbnb, stick them on booking.com, and start picking up campers who weren't campers before.
Good luck getting them. You can find them right now. That's the
units.
They're hard to get, or they're overpriced, but I mean, there's a reason for it, is because the parks that have invested into them, they're selling and they're buying a lot more, right? And in many cases, I mean, again, even if you're an RVer, a lot of times it's convenient just to stay in a cabin. I was going to say, from the communication thing, I think that's a really good point. Again, it's one of those things you could probably do an entire topic on. I mean, even like on a different industry, we go into restaurants all the time now, and there's hardly anyone in there, and they're like, it's a 45-minute wait. And you're going, well, how in the world is it a 45-minute wait? There's like 7 people here. But you usually just say, oh, okay, yeah, I don't want to wait 45 minutes. We're going to go somewhere else. And that the reason, or a couple of times that we've inquired, it's like, oh, actually, we're low on staff, right? We're low on staff, or we're low on, we only have one cook working back there. And I'm going, how in the world are you just not explaining that to me? Why aren't you just telling me, hey, we're short staffed tonight. We'd love to have you guys. It's just going to take a little bit longer than it normally would. We only have one cook back there. If you're okay with that wait, we'd love to have you. If you're in a hurry, we just want to be upfront and honest with you that it's going to take a little bit longer. Like, that to me makes me want to almost support that business even more, knowing that they're having a hard time, finding employees, and just being transparent, communicating. I think it's the same thing in the camping industry too. Like, if there is some sort of shortcoming, if there is a lack of staff, or you weren't able to call everybody back, or whatever the scenario is, just open communication and being honest with where you're at and what's going on, not creating this big sob story and making everyone feel sorry for it, but just being perfectly honest with what the scenario is, what the situation is, and we can accommodate or not, but based on that, you guys make the decision. It's crazy to me how many restaurants are still doing that. Just, it's a 45-minute wait, and you're going, how? But they're not explaining why.
80% of negative reviews come from expectations not matching what the customer expects, good or bad. Go ahead, Randy.
Wait. What percentage was that, Brian? You got cut off. What percent?
80% was what it was years ago when I read Hug Your Haters. It's in there, but I'm sure it's increased by now. But go ahead, Randy. Sorry.
Yeah, Casey, to your point, and I think all of our points, the best thing you can do is be a truth teller with any business you have, no matter what that business is, in particular campgrounds, because to your point, Brian, expectations are set by what they see, what they read, and what have you like that. If you exceed expectations, you've got a friend for life. If you fall short of what you've pledged, you've got a detractor for life, right? And you'll never get that person back. But one of the things that I think often gets lost, and again, it goes to the objectivity thing. When I look at my website, sometimes my old website, I'd be like, why didn't I look at this thing sooner? This is not what we do. And you just forget about it. You set it and forget it. Then all of a sudden you forget you've got this living entity that's breathing who I am as a company. And I go back and say, but that doesn't even describe what we do now. So the whole point being this, if I'm walking around my campground and there's the smell of pine coming through the air, so I'm hearing birds overhead and I can smell a campfire in the distance, I know what I'm experiencing. But if I just say verbally to somebody, really nice tree cover in a quiet, relaxed setting, I don't picture myself there. But if I start describing, imagine yourself in the beauty of the outdoors with the smell of the campfire wafting through as the native birds soar overhead, then include a big, giant picture of what you're talking about, you're not romanticizing or telling tales. You're saying, this is exactly what I experience when I'm here. I'd like you to experience that too. But telling the truth about who you are with limitations, with your positive stuff, and just being honest about what you've got and not over-promising, that's the best way you can always have a consistent good experience and minimize those complaints. But to Mark's point also, it's really hard not to take it personal. But if you just got to be objective and say, I understand what they said. What are they telling me exactly, though? What was the source of the discontent? What's the core issue here? That's a hard thing to do. It takes a lot of practice.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Yeah, I usually write the first response email and then delete it and write another one afterwards.
I've done that.
Sit on it for 24 hours.
I may have deleted some things that I've typed in response, Mark, on Facebook. Maybe once or twice. May have happened.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting dynamic. So, but yeah, I think that was a pretty good conversation we had today. We started off with, small park. Well, we started off something before small parks. It's been so long,
Trade
like an hour. I'm old. Yeah, trade show. And then we talked about small parks and the dynamic and adapting technology. And then we ended up at online reviews and all the things in between. So it was a pretty interesting conversation. You never know where these things are going to go. So anybody have any closing thoughts? We've got a couple minutes left.
Yeah, remember, don't plan any more than 3 days in advance. Who knows what's going to happen?
I feel like
that's my final advice for everybody.
Unless you're forecasting occupancy, then look at those reports. And do
that's a business opportunity for you, Mark. You should sell that like a seer.
Yeah, sell the book
3 days in advance.
The new management plan, 3 days in advance.
Want to know what happens tomorrow? Contact Mark.
Yeah.
I think that would work really well for you. Randy would probably sign up for sure.
Well, I think so. I think there's something for success planning by 4 o'clock. We'll just kind of leave it at that. I mean, that's all I can look at. By today, I think I can do this. Beyond that, don't ask.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything final thoughts, Sandy, Casey?
Nope. Good conversation.
Well, 6 days from now, the Canadian Outdoor Hospitality Conference and Expo starts, hopefully.
Hopefully.
3 days. We're only planning 3 days in advance. No.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
There's lots of things, exciting, awesome things to happen there. It's, again, virtual this year. And so, that impacts how some of the things will go for sure. But overall, I'm super excited we've got several attendees registered and lots of really great sessions and speakers and all kinds of things lined up. So I hope, if you're not registered yet and want to attend, go do that. Reach out to me.
I think I was looking at the attendance numbers. I'm pretty sure we have more attendees than we did last year. So that's super exciting.
Yes, sir. You're correct.
But yeah. All right. So thank you all for joining us. Appreciate it for another episode of MC Fireside Chats. Just as a reminder, we are available as a podcast for you to listen to and on mcfiresidechats.com if you'd like to go back and check out this episode or any past episode in the past, present, whatever. I'm stumbling over my words now, so we'll just forget about all that. Super excited to take next week off. We won't be here for a show. We'll do the live show there from the Toronto Spring Camping and RV Show on Friday, but we're going to take next week off because Cara and I are obviously going to be doing a virtual conference where our time will otherwise be occupied. But we will be back the third week with a Campground Owner Focus show. So excited to have that, some new guests on that show as well. Other than that, thank you all for joining us. I really appreciate it. And we will see you all next week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks for watching this episode of MC Fireside Chats, hosted by Brian Searl and Cara Csizmadia. Have a suggestion for a future show or want to see your campground or company as part of an episode? Email us at hello@moderncampground.com. Join us next week for another episode. And don't miss the latest outdoor hospitality news and commentary from around the world at moderncampground.com.